What is up, everyone? This is Adam with the Lavin Real Estate Group and Next Home Synergy. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about the buying process of your first home. If you're not really sure, where to start, how this whole thing is going to go down. Right now, as we move into the summer of 2022, I'm starting to get a lot of buyers that are coming out of the woodwork. They're first-time home buyers. They want to jump in now before the market gets any crazier, rates go up any higher than they already are right now, or they're just, at that point in life. Like I said in one of my other videos, over the next 2 to 3 years, this is the highest jump of millennials that are going to be able to purchase a home. So along with everybody that's already, in the standard cycle of buying and selling homes, all the millennials are kind of at the peak right now of purchasing their first home. So for those of you out there that don't own a home right now and you're starting to, buy your first home, this is kind of for you. So these are the steps and things that you want to think about and mentally prepare for since you haven't been through this process yet. The first thing that you absolutely have to do is, particularly in this market, is either have a pre-approval or a proof of funds. Now, a proof of funds means if you were going to come in as a cash buyer. Now, even though you may be a first-time home buyer, there are a lot of people out there that have either saved their money, and have combined incomes, or they might get a gift from their parents or something like that, or an inheritance. And there are, first-time home buyers out there that don't necessarily need a mortgage. And so in your case, you're going to need something called a proof of funds. What that proof of funds needs to show is that you have enough money in liquid form to purchase a home, at whatever the home price is, plus anything else that would be required, such as title insurance, any transfer taxes or closing costs that might be involved. Now, not having a mortgage, your closing costs are going to slightly decrease, but there is still the transfer tax, as well as the transfer of taxes that have already been paid in certain townships, water bills, electric bills, that kind of thing. So you will need a proof of funds that shows that. It needs to be a bank account. It doesn't necessarily have to have any great information, personal information on it, other than the amount that's in there, and one account has to show that. It cannot be a 401k, simply because there's too many issues that can come up with taking that large amount of money out of a 401k, and so generally those aren't accepted as a proof of funds for anything. Now, if you wanted to already remove that money out and put it into a bank account so that it's readily available, that is certainly up to you if that is what makes sense for you financially. And if you are not in that situation where you might be a cash buyer, you do need a pre-approval for a mortgage. A big thing I strongly suggest is, if you haven't done that, don't Google pre-approval for a mortgage and go out and sign up for one online. Make sure you talk to either a local agent and find out who they work with, a real estate agent who they work with, or talk to a local mortgage broker. I strongly suggest staying away from big chains, particularly if you're in the Delaware County, Chester County, or Philadelphia markets. It just works a lot better because of all the individual township rules and tax codes and everything that goes on, that you work with somebody that's local. Certainly, if you need help with that, reach out to me. I have a great person that can work with you. But in general, stay away from the big names online, because they're just really not great for first-time home buyers. Also, I would probably, in most scenarios, talk to a mortgage broker as opposed to just the bank that you work with. Usually you can get a better deal or a better rate through your mortgage lender as opposed to just going through a bank. Obviously, it's certainly up to you, and there's certain scenarios where it might make more sense, particularly with VA loans, but in general, I would definitely talk to a mortgage lender. And with that pre-approval, the reason we need that before we do anything is because, we're going to find out how much you qualify for a home. And not only does the ultimate price that you're going to pay for on that home matter, but also, your monthly payment is going to matter. And just going off of, the monthly estimate that's on Zillow or Redfin or something like that, that's really not the total picture. because depending on what type of loan you get, how much money you put down, there might be other monthly fees associated with that loan. So it's really best to talk to a mortgage lender and find out what monthly budget is going to work for you and your family so that you can translate that into the ultimate price that you're going to pay for this mortgage. Kind of walk through the ins and outs of all that. And that gives us the starting point of, how much we're going to put into a mortgage, how much cash we have to set aside to put towards the purchase of the home, and how we're going to attack this process. And that's where, I can come in and kind of help you zero in on an area, which brings me to number 2, the home search. Now, most people by the time I talk to them, they've already been on Redfin, on Realtor.com, everybody goes on Zillow, or, anywhere else you might find a home online. But generally people have already kind of been looking, if not driving around in the area, and they sort of have an idea of where they want to live, the price bracket they want to be in, a little bit of what they're looking for. What I'll tell you is, number one, some of these houses are deceiving based on their pictures. So you definitely want to work with an agent that can get you into some of these homes and kind of give you a feel, maybe even a little bit before you're definitely going to start writing offers on homes, just so you can, maybe not mentally sell yourself on a place, but kind of get into some of these areas, see what they're like, what the neighborhoods are like in person, and what the houses feel like inside. Because sometimes, like I said, those pictures can be a little bit deceiving. So even if you're not ready to purchase a home, if you work with a great agent, they're going to know, what style of home that you're looking at now is going to compare to other homes in that neighborhood and where to find those. So you could go into one home and, you'll find a very similar home a couple months from now when it goes up for sale, at least style-wise. Now, outside of the style, in your home search, you're also going to want to understand what your square footage needs are. Now, obviously, the easy one is like, well, how many bedrooms and bathrooms do you want? But the other thing you really need to consider is what you're looking for in terms of square footage in order to fit everybody in the house. So that way you can decide, do we really need that 4th bedroom? Do we not need the 4th bedroom? Do we need a finished basement? Do we not need a finished basement? Do we need a basement that can be finished down the road if we plan on growing our family at some point, or, for hobbies or something like that? And then along with the style of the home and the square footage of the home, obviously we want to make sure that you're in the correct school district if that's a concern for you. If it's not, and it's more of a locality thing based on your ability to get to work on time or avoid traffic or something like that, all of those things can be taken into account too. But again, you want to work with a great agent that includes that in their search, so that everybody's on the same page and you can quickly jump on those houses once they become available. The other thing that I want to talk about with the home search that some people don't think about because they get so raveled up in like what HGTV tells them to pay attention to, on the resale of the home, is the style of home important, whether or not it's updated? Absolutely. Everybody is impressed by bathrooms and kitchens. And people worry about what bedroom they're going to be in, things like that. But the other thing I tell people all the time, particularly if it's your first time buying a home, is really consider the hobbies that you and your family might have and where that's going to fit into your new home. And be realistic about it. Like, I'm buying a house and I maybe want to garden. Okay, well, that's great. Now we have the ability to do that. But if we're purchasing a home, if you know that your family, drives an RV, and that's their idea of a vacation every single summer, then we need a room to put that. If you're somebody that works on motorcycles or cars, we need to make sure that you have enough room to do that. If you have, an art hobby or a crafts hobby, we need to make sure that there's a room capable of holding that so that you have a space that makes sense for you. The same thing with home theaters and the whole man cave thing. We need to make sure that there's a room that can accommodate that, because if your family event is to play video games on the weekend, that's fine. I'm not here to judge whether that's a good or bad thing, but we want to make sure that the entire basement isn't flooded with light so that you can enjoy your home theater at the optimal level. So outside of, does the home look pretty in pictures, we really want to think of the functionality of it once you get in there and once you're living in there, and what's going to work best for you. Number 3 is, once we find the home that you're looking for, we're putting in the offer. So the biggest thing that I let people know, particularly if it's your first time buying a home and you're renting a house and you might need to get out at a certain time, is the offer to close timeline. So right now, in the first half of 2022 going into the summer, in general, homes close from the time that you put an offer and it's signed by both parties till the day you get to take over the house, as long as everything goes okay, in about 30 days. Now, there are times where the closing has to happen sooner, and if all parties are able to, including the lender, are able to close faster, we can certainly do that. Vice versa, there are times where the person selling the home needs to sell the home and needs a little bit more time to find their next home. And so in that scenario, it might take a little bit longer. Obviously, all of this is ultimately negotiable, but in general, it's going to take about 30 days. So it's not like you can buy the home and move in the next day. It's also not like you could find the home and then just wait 6 months. You could do that, but you're going to have to pay your mortgage and your rent. So the first thing that you have to have in order to write an offer is your pre-approval letter or your proof of funds. You absolutely have to have this. If you're putting an all-cash offer in, you need to make sure that you're able to show the proof of funds, exactly like I said in the beginning of the video, not in a 401k, but actually in liquid cash. If you have a pre-approval, then it needs to be a pre-approval up to that certain amount. The next thing along the lines of financials that's also required is something called a BFI, or the buyer's financial information. On that sheet, it's a standard sheet that I or your real estate agent can send you, and it needs to be submitted with an offer, is the name of all the parties that are going to be on the mortgage, and then ultimately signing all the paperwork for the house, as well as the agreement of sale that we're about to talk about. It has to be both people, their current jobs, any of their past jobs, if it's been very recent on a job change for some reason, your tenure there, contact information for those jobs, how much money you make at each one, and then also the amount of money in your bank accounts that's available. That money has to show that you can pay for the escrow deposit on the house, the down payment on your mortgage that's required based on what your pre-approval says, as well as any estimated closing costs that might be involved. And that kind of gives the listing agent and the seller an idea of, can these people financially afford the house, and is it razor thin? If it's razor thin, not that, with the amount of money that you owe versus what you have in your bank account, not that you're not going to qualify for that loan, but if there's another person out there that has more money, they might be, chosen over you because they show the ability to essentially, save any issues that might pop up financially down the road in the process of the sale. So I strongly suggest that you show all your funds that you have available, and you don't try to hide anything. Sometimes people feel weird putting all the money that they have down, and they just want to show the exact amount due. It's really not a good idea. It's really a better idea to show that you have a buffer zone if you do have one available. With that, that's all your financial information that's covered. The next part is the agreement of sale. In another video, I'll go over all the pieces of the agreement of sale because it's a pretty detailed document. There's lots of ins and outs, but the main things on that agreement of sale are the ultimate purchase price. You're going to negotiate whether or not any seller's assist is requested, whether or not you're getting a mortgage and how much that mortgage is going to be for, whether or not an appraisal is contingent on it, and then any inspections that might be needed or requested, as well as what your suggested closing date is. Now, that is the offer that's going through. The details of that may or may not be negotiated by the buyer's agent and the buyers, along with the seller's agent and the sellers. However, that's the initial document that is going to get submitted, and it needs to be signed by all parties that are going to be on the mortgage and ultimately want their name on the house. And then with all that is the negotiations. So, you're going to submit your offer. And what I will tell you is that the time for negotiations really varies depending on a lot of factors. Sometimes the negotiations will happen overnight the day that you submit the offer. Sometimes it gets drawn out a little bit longer because the seller wants to, give it some time to either look at the offers that they have or give it a little bit more time to get other offers in some cases. Unfortunately, even though you're able to put a respond by date on that agreement of sale, right now, being in a seller's market, we're kind of at the mercy of sellers in terms of how long it takes them to negotiate. And especially if there's an estate involved for whatever reason, or a divorce, and there is a judge involved or any part of the court system involved, that can also extend the length of negotiations because there's a secondary approval process that's involved as well. So there's really no cut and dry scenario for that. So it's important to know that once you put that agreement of sale in an offer, you may get a response back right away. There are unfortunately scenarios where we don't get a response and we just find out through the grapevine that it's sold to somebody else, or it may be a little bit more delayed than what you might expect. So, it could happen within hours. I've seen it happen over a week or two, particularly in the case where a court's involved. So it really depends. The number 3 thing to understand, or the number 4 thing, to understand is if your offer gets accepted. So if your offer gets accepted, that is day one, essentially. So you're off to the races. We are now under contract. It is a legally binding contract, and it's super important that you have a very organized real estate agent who is managing the contract, or as a team that manages the contract for them and is going to work with you and keep you up to date as to what is the next step that is needed from you, and what they are working on as well, and making sure that both parties are staying true to any of the dates that are in that contract. The first one that generally pops up is the escrow or good faith deposit. Now, an escrow deposit, again, in our agreement of sale or offer video, I'll go a little bit more in depth in that, but usually you have the first 5 days to send that in. It usually needs to be done in certified funds, and while it varies offer to offer and scenario to scenario, usually I suggest about 2.5% of the sales price as a good faith deposit. And so that deposit is not allowed to be touched by either party. We'll go in a little bit more depth on the other video as to exactly what it is, but it is ultimately transferred to your closing costs. So it's not additional money on top of everything, just sort of upfront money that you're going to spend in 30 to 45 days anyway. The next portion of the agreement, once you send that in, and usually it's the first 5 days you have to get the escrow deposit in, the next step is inspections, if any were requested and agreed upon. Again, we'll go into a little bit more in depth as to all the inspections that are possible, the pros and cons of each inspection, and why they may or may not be needed and why they may or may not be accepted within the negotiations. But if you have inspections, there's sort of 2 parts to it. In general, you have the first chunk of time to get your company hired and sent out, and the inspection reports back. Those inspection reports then need to be reviewed between the buyer's agent and the buyers, and it needs to be discussed as to what you're going to request be fixed or monetarily adjusted within the sales price, what things you're going to let go. Now, what I will tell you is, and we'll go more in depth again in this in another video, but what I will tell you is that every house that you're buying, unless it's new construction, is a used house. And just like buying a used car, there's generally something wrong somewhere with one of these houses. So no house is perfect by any means. Some are in much better condition than others, but the inspector's job is to find everything that's wrong with the house. So if it's the first time you're looking at an inspection report, they can be a little bit scary. If it is your first time, I would probably ask your agent to show you an example of what an inspection might look like, what a good inspection might look like, what a bad inspection might look like, just so you can have an idea of what you're looking at. And also they should be able to kind of walk you through what that inspection is going to entail. what you need to worry about, what you don't need to worry about, and they should have pointed out the big things probably that are visible by eye within your initial walkthrough before you decided to put an offer in on the home anyway. After you have your initial inspection period, there's an additional set of time, usually 2 to 5 days, but again, all these dates are negotiable, where you're able to negotiate what you want out of the inspections, and that is called the reply to inspections by the buyer, and then the seller then either responds, doesn't respond, but there's a final finality to the negotiation. There is the ability also within that time frame where if no agreement can be if nothing can be agreed upon, then the buyer does have the option of backing out at that point based on something that is evident in the inspection as an issue, that neither party could come to agreement on how it should be repaired or adjusted, and you can get that escrow deposit back then if your contract was written correctly by your agent. So, make sure that they know how to write that in there. After that, once we get through inspections, we talk to our title company, who checks all sorts of things for you, but essentially make sure that the deed of the house is okay to transfer, and they will also offer title insurance, and they basically make sure that there's no back taxes or any sort of liens against the house at all or the property, or any other issues that you can think of legally that might pop up. So that'll be done, and you will work with the title company to make sure all that gets done, and then also get title insurance on the house. At the same time, you're going to be working with your lender, because the lender is now going to put this mortgage into what's called underwriting, and this is what causes this length or delay from the time that you put the offer on the house till the final time that you get to purchase and actually take over possession of the house. The underwriters will drive people crazy sometimes, but they're just doing their job and making sure that you're financially capable of purchasing the house and that nothing has happened along the way. No documents were falsified or anything like that. So it will probably get frustrating where they ask for the same document 5 times in a row. But if you're working with a great lender, they will keep ahead of everything for you and make sure that you get to closing just fine. But just so you know, this is kind of the paperwork part for you where you're going to want to scream sometimes, but we all go through it. So the other thing to also worry about is to make sure that you know up front if there's any leased equipment that's going to have to transfer over to you. One big reason why is because you're probably going to have to qualify for the leases on this equipment. It can be anything from water softener equipment or water filtration equipment. It can be, anything to do with the HVAC in some cases, and a big one is solar panels. So if you see solar panels on a house, it's probably a red flag that there's a lease that's going to have to be taken over by you. Hopefully you know about that up front, or the agent's able to point it out to you. However, you need to make sure that the transfer of these items happen before you go to closing, or title won't be able to clear it, and also it may adjust your ability to get the loan if you were kind of borderline or at the max of your budget. So super important to pay attention to. Also, this is a great time to look into a home warranty, and you are also going to want to get home insurance. Now, if you're purchasing the home in cash, you don't necessarily need to get home insurance, but I would strongly recommend it. And if you are getting a mortgage, you're going to need homeowners insurance. So you want to check with your lender to see, what the standard limits are, and then from there talk to your mortgage insurance or a homeowner's insurance company and see if there's any additional insurance that you think you might need for your personal peace of mind. And then the final part of all this is closing. So at closing, that's when everything's gone through, the paperwork's okay, negotiations are done, and all we need to do is sign over the title and deed to the house from the seller to the buyer or the purchaser now. And then also the biggest portion is if you're getting a mortgage, all the mortgage documents that are involved. Some of this can be done online up front ahead of time. However, a lot of it needs to be done in person in ink. So this is generally the longest process. The other thing you will absolutely need is to get the final closing costs from your lender ahead of time, and you're going to need a certified check. Now, I know a lot of people out there with online banks these days have issues getting certified checks and certified funds. In said case, there are scenarios where you're able to wire the money to the title insurance or to the title and abstract company. However, it takes several days sometimes for that wire to go through, and we can't actually close onto the house until the money is all there for the closing costs. So something you want to plan up front ahead of time if you know you have to wire funds, or also make sure you're able to get a certified check. Now, with that, I also always suggest that the buyers bring at least one blank personal check. At times, for whatever reason, if things get delayed or something gets missed, sometimes, the lender might have been off by a couple of dollars, and it's never, thousands of dollars, but it'll be like $10, $15. You can't hand over cash or a credit card. It's got to be in a check. So if for some reason that happened, you don't want to have to run out and try to figure it out and then come back. It's easier just to take care of it right then and there. So just bring a personal check, and if there's any issues, you can write off the $15 balance for some reason if there is one. 99.9% of the time it doesn't happen, but I have seen it happen, and I've always advised my clients to bring a check, and we were good to go. And the other important thing is to bring your photo IDs of anybody that's purchasing the home. And that's, we're signing legal documents and probably the most expensive thing that you've ever done. So we just need copies of the licenses to send in to title and to the lender, and make sure you're the real people signing all this. So that is the nuts and bolts of it. I know that was super long. Beyond that, it becomes slightly more complex. So check out my other videos for sure on things like inspections and the agreement of sale. But that's kind of what you can look at expecting. So I would say the biggest thing to understand that in this market right now is that if you have to time out a lease from the time that you get your home accepted under contract, it takes about 30 to 45 days. So, going out, looking at the house, putting an offer in, that's a couple days. Even if you put an offer in and win it on the first house that you buy, that's still an extra week. So give yourself some ample time to get out there, get accustomed to the market, and have your best shot at making sure that you're able to move out at the time that you're looking for and not spend additional money on any rent that is involved. So if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them for you. I know there was a lot of information, and there's a lot of unique situations that pop up. I've certainly been exposed to all of them, and I can definitely help you out the best that I can, or get you in contact with somebody that can help you out as well. So feel free to call or text me at any time. My number is 610-442-9371. You can email me as well at the email at the bottom of this page. And that is it. Thank you so much. Like I said, check out the other videos for more in-depth instruction and information on some of those other things we talked about. But otherwise, thank you. I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to working with you soon.